It was already dark when Walter sank onto the floor, the blue eviction notice fluttering from his trembling hand. The TV played in the background, muted, casting flickers of light across the peeling wallpaper. His living room was bare now, only a recliner, a dusty photo of his late wife on the mantel, and a cardboard box labeled kitchen sat silently in the corners of the room. His hands, calloused from years of service, shook as he scrolled through the last message she ever sent. Just, "Hold on a little longer, baby. I swear this is the last time I'll need your help." That was 2 weeks ago. He hadn't heard from Lena since. Walter stared at the profile picture that no longer existed. Just a gray circle now. The name was gone. The smile, her smile that he had memorized, gone to dot. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he looked like he might call out, like maybe she'd answer. But instead, he just whispered a single word, barely audible. "Why?" From the doorway, someone watched him, tall, unsure, carrying the weight of years between them. David hadn't seen his father in over 5 years, and now, standing there, he barely recognized the man who used to carry him on his shoulders. What happened to him? The camera lingers on Walter's face, greased, tired, and broken, then shifts to a glowing crypto app on his phone. The balance reads $0. Walter mortgaged his house, cashed in his retirement. He gave it all away to someone who never existed. And now, even the people closest to him think he made it up. But what if everything she said wasn't a lie? Who was Lena really? And how did she manage to fool a man like Walter so completely? The front door creaks as David steps in. Walter looks up. Their eyes meet and neither one says a word. Not yet. Walter Reed wasn't always this hollow version of himself. Once, not long ago, he was a man of quiet strength, disciplined, structured, and deeply loyal. A retired Marine with a proud posture that years of pain couldn't quite break. At 68, he still rose at dawn like he did in the service, brewed his coffee strong, and stood by the window watching the sunrise paint the rooftops gold. That was his moment of peace. He lived alone in a small, 2-bedroom house on the edge of town, the same one he and his late wife, Linda, had bought decades ago when life still felt full of direction and purpose. Linda passed away 3 years ago, pancreatic cancer. It was fast, too fast. One day she was making blueberry pancakes and humming old songs in the kitchen. The next she was hooked up to machines that beeped more than they breathed. When she left, the world around Walter turned into static. The walls of the house were still hers. Her floral curtains hung in the kitchen window, faded by sunlight. Her collection of ceramic birds lined the shelves. He never moved them, couldn't. Most days, Walter didn't speak to a single soul. He'd shuffle to the VA hospital for checkups or walk stiffly to the park, just to sit on the same bench he and Linda used to frequent. The pigeons still came. So did Susan, his neighbor from across the street, a woman in her late 50s with a sharp tongue, but a soft spot for Walter. She often brought him meals, claiming she cooked too much, but he always saw through her excuse. She just didn't want him to be alone. But Walter kept his distance. He didn't want to burden anyone, especially not David, his only son. They hadn't spoken in years, not since that night. It was the night of Linda's funeral. Tension had been boiling for a while, David accusing his father of being too emotionally closed, too rigid, too obsessed with pride to really connect. Walter, wounded and grieving, had barked back in a way he instantly regretted. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. David left that night, moved abroad for work, and they hadn't talked since. Not a text, not even a birthday card. And so the days bled into one another. Coffee at sunrise, silence by noon, and empty evenings spent watching old westerns that no longer made him smile. He talked to Linda's picture sometimes, not because he believed she could hear, but because it was easier than hearing nothing at all. Still, Walter wasn't bitter. He wasn't angry at the world. He was just tired, lonely, and aching for connection, for someone to ask how his day was, for someone to remember he existed. He wasn't looking for love when Lena messaged him. He didn't even understand how she found his profile. He only had an old Facebook account he barely touched, mostly to keep up with veterans groups. But there she was, smiling in her profile picture. Soft eyes, a kind expression. She said she was a nurse, a widow, like Him, working overseas with a humanitarian group. At first, he didn't believe it. Why would someone like her reach out to someone like him? But she was persistent, gentle, curious. She asked about his wife, his service, his dog tags. She listened not with pity, but with interest, with respect. She made him feel seen. And for a man who'd spent the last 3 years feeling like a shadow, that meant everything. Walter didn't fall in love with Lena overnight. It happened slowly, like water rising in a glass. He found himself smiling when he saw her messages. He shaved more often, started cleaning the house. Susan noticed. She even teased him about it, but he just chuckled and deflected. Something was changing. A light had turned back on in Walter's chest. But when something seems to perfect, is it? Because no one, not Susan, not David, not even Walter, could have imagined just how deep this illusion would cut, and how far it would go before everything shattered. It started with good mornings. Every day, like clockwork, Lena's message would pop up just after sunrise. Good morning, Walter. Did you sleep okay? I dreamed about you last night. At first, he didn't know how to respond. It had been decades since someone cared how he slept, someone who wasn't a doctor or a neighbor trying to be polite. He'd reread her texts 3 or 4 times before typing a short reply, careful with every word, like it might scare her off. But she didn't leave. If anything, Lena leaned in closer. She told him about her days working as a nurse with a medical charity in South Sudan. She described the dusty roads, the crowded clinics, the children who hugged her legs and wouldn't let go. She sent photos, some of her in scrubs, smiling through a surgical mask, others with local kids who beamed beside her. It all looked real, the kind of life Walter had only ever seen on late-night news segments or charity commercials, and she wanted to share it with him. Their conversations stretched from 5-minute check-ins to full hours spent typing back and forth. Eventually, they started voice messages. Her voice was soft, slightly accented. She said she grew up in New Zealand, lived in London before moving into humanitarian work. There was warmth in the way she said his name, like he mattered. Walter told her things he hadn't told anyone in years, about Linda, and how she used to dance barefoot in the kitchen while flipping pancakes, about the night he almost died in the jungle, and how a fellow Marine dragged him out, about how empty the house felt now, especially around dinner time. Lena listened without interrupting, always responding with something kind, or funny, or quietly profound. He felt like a man again, not a burden, not a ghost in a world that moved too fast without him. She asked to see a photo of him. He hesitated. I'm not much to look at, but she insisted. He finally sent one, him sitting on the porch, holding a cup of coffee, the dog tags from his service still around his neck, a little blurry. No filters. She replied in seconds. You look strong and kind, just like I imagined. That night, Walter slept better than he had in months. He started planning his days around their conversations. If the internet at her camp was working, they'd talk twice a day. If it wasn't, she'd warn him ahead of time, apologizing like she owed him something. He didn't mind. He missed her when she was gone. After a few weeks, she started calling him my Wally. It made him blush, even though no one was around to see it. It reminded him of Linda, how she used to call him that when she teased him. But Lena's voice was younger, hopeful. He didn't tell Susan. She already suspected something, but he brushed her off. She wouldn't understand. She was practical to a fault and always suspicious of strangers. But Walter wasn't ready to let anyone pick apart what was growing in his chest. Lena said she was planning to come home soon, back to the States. Her contract was ending in a few months. She wanted to meet him, maybe spend a weekend somewhere quiet, by the ocean. He liked the sound of that. She asked what kind of flowers Linda had loved. I'd like to visit her grave, pay my respects, she said. That was the moment Walter felt his heart crack open, not from pain but from something he hadn't felt in years: intimacy, care, the feeling of being chosen, not pitied. In her messages, Lena would sometimes get poetic. She talked about starting over, about how people with bruised hearts could still build something beautiful, about the simplicity of love when it's honest. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? She had never asked for a thing, not money, not gifts, Not even photos beyond the one he sent. If anything, she gave time, attention, joy, and Walter, who had once sat in a dark house speaking to no one, now found himself laughing aloud in the kitchen, talking to his phone like a teenager, shaving every morning, listening to love songs. On the radio again, she called one night while it was storming on her end, said the power kept flickering. Her voice was close to the Miklo. Private. If I died tonight, Wally, I'd want you to know, you made me believe in love again, he said. Nothing at first. Just swallowed the knot in his throat and whispered, you too, Lena. But in the quiet that followed, a sliver of unease crept in, because as real as she felt, he'd never actually seen her live. No video calls, no voice chats longer than a minute. She said the connection was too weak, that the hospital had policies, that she didn't like how she looked on camera after long shifts, and Walter believed her. He wanted to believe her. But in stories like these, what we want to believe can sometimes be exactly what destroys us. And the story of Lena was just beginning. It was a Thursday morning when Lena sent the first message that felt different. Wally, I hate to ask, but I don't know who else to turn to. Walter blinked at the screen, heart thudding slightly faster than usual. She never asked for anything, not even once. If anything, she always downplayed her struggles. But this time, something in her tone felt urgent, vulnerable. She explained that her bank card had been frozen due to suspicious activity in the country she was stationed in, something about international sanctions and wire transfers. She was embarrassed to even bring it up, said she needed to pay for medicine and supplies for a sick baby at the clinic. It wasn't even for her. She insisted it was for work. Just $300 in crypto. Just until the bank sorted things out. Walter didn't hesitate. He barely understood how crypto worked, but he figured it couldn't be that different from sending a wire transfer. With help from a tutorial on YouTube and a bit of squinting at the screen, he opened an account, bought the coins, and sent them to the wallet address she gave him. She thanked him profusely, sent voice messages telling him how grateful she was, that she'd pay him back the moment her account was unlocked, that he was a blessing. That night, Walter felt proud. He hadn't just talked to Lena, he'd helped her, protected her. He felt useful again, like a man with purpose. The next week, she messaged again, I hate this. I swear it's the last time. The bank issue had apparently worsened. She was stuck in the country until she paid an exit tax that wasn't covered by her organization. Just $1,000 more. After that, she'd be on a plane. She even sent a screenshot of her itinerary, a blurry photo of what looked like a flight booking. JFK Airport. Landing Friday. She said she'd stay in a hotel nearby, and if he wanted, they could meet for dinner. Walter sent the money that same day. This time, no hesitation. He even shaved that morning and put out his best shirt, just in case she showed up earlier than planned. But Friday came and went. No Lena. She messaged late that night apologizing again. Customs had delayed her due to missing paperwork. She sent a frustrated voice note, almost in tears, saying how humiliated she felt, how it seemed like the whole world was trying to keep them apart. But she would fix it. She had to. Walter replied with a single line, I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out. And so the pattern began. One request became two became five, every time. The story made sense. Hospital fines, identity verifications, bribes to corrupt officials. She always promised it was the last time, that she'd pay him back in full. She even started talking about opening a joint account when she returned. She wanted to invest in a place together, a small home, maybe by the lake, a place for healing, for growing old together. Walter believed her, because how could someone who shared so much of herself be lying? She called him her warrior, her safe place, the one good thing in a world full of broken promises. And slowly, Walter began giving more than just money. He started pulling away from everything else. He skipped his VA appointments, ignored Susan's knock at the door. He didn't want her to ask questions. He stopped going to the park. He stayed online, waiting for messages, watching that little green dot next to her name light up and fade again. He even reached out to his bank to increase his credit limit, Sold a few keepsakes, online things he never thought he'd part with. Linda's antique brooch, a limited edition military plaque gifted to him at retirement. But it was for Lena, for their future, for a love that had saved him from the brink. Still, a quiet voice inside him, distant and faint, started whispering doubts. Why were the problems never ending? Why had he still not seen her face in real time? Why did her stories start to blur, dates shifting, details changing? But Walter silenced that voice, because if he questioned Lena, he'd lose the only light he had left. And once you've built your entire hope around a person, the idea of losing them feels worse than anything they could ever take from you, even if, deep down, something tells you she already has. By the time spring arrived, Walter had stopped answering his door. The house grew quieter, the air thicker. Dust settled on the furniture like a slow snowfall. The mail piled up in the hallway, mostly bills and final warnings he couldn't bring himself to open. Outside, the trees bloomed, but inside, the seasons didn't change. He lived for Lena's messages, her voice notes, her little "I miss you" texts that came at odd hours, reminding him she was still out there, still trying, still his. Every vibration of his phone sent a jolt through his body, as if hope itself lived in those small, glowing notifications. But everything else in his life, it faded. He stopped visiting the VA clinic. The nurses called twice, then gave up. Susan, his neighbor, knocked 3 times in 1 week. The last time, she left a note under his door. "Walt, I'm worried. Just let me know you're okay." He never replied, not because he didn't care, but because if she asked questions, he wouldn't know how to lie. He couldn't explain that he'd already sent Lena nearly $20,000, or that he was considering taking out another loan to help her finally come home, because every time she told him it was the last hurdle, the final fee, the last verification, he believed it. He needed to. Lena had become his world, more than a romantic fantasy. She was his only real connection. She knew his routines, his fears, his pain. She spoke to him like she saw all the broken parts and loved him anyway. He didn't want to risk losing that. He didn't want to be alone again. Not truly alone. Lena made him feel needed, wanted, alive. And slowly, she became the only voice he trusted. She started talking about long-term plans. Once she got to the U.S., she wanted to invest. She'd saved up, she said. Knew a few people who were doing well with crypto. If Walter wanted, they could build something together. A portfolio, a future. She said he didn't have to live modestly anymore. He'd spent his life giving his time, his youth, his body to the military, and then his years to grief. Now, it was his turn to receive. He believed that too. So when she said she needed a little more, just one more investment, to unlock her earnings, Walter took out a second mortgage on his house. Quietly, no one knew. Not Susan. Not the bank teller, who assumed it was for remodeling. In his mind, it was already worth it. Because soon, Lena would walk through his front door, and everything would change. They'd repaint the kitchen, plant tomatoes in the backyard. He'd introduce her to the bench at the park where Linda used to sit, and Lena would lay her head on his shoulder and say, "We made it." But deep beneath that hope, something else was forming. A gnawing anxiety. Her messages were getting shorter, less frequent. Some days, she disappeared entirely. When he asked if everything was okay, she blamed the network, said the clinic was busy, that she was exhausted. And then came the first moment he couldn't ignore. He sent money and didn't hear from her for 3 days. He didn't sleep, barely ate, stared at the glowing screen until his eyes watered. When she finally messaged back, she apologized profusely, claimed there was a robbery at the clinic, and she had to file reports with local police, said her phone was taken, swore she would explain everything soon. Walter said he understood. But something cracked that day. Not his faith in her, no, that held strong, but his sense of himself. He was no longer the man he used to be. Not even the lonely version of him that sat quietly by the window months ago. That man still had boundaries, still had pride, still had a sense of the world's limits. Now he was someone else entirely. Dependent, afraid, obsessed. Everything, his time, his money, His heart belonged to a woman he had never met, and still, he clung to her like she was the only thing keeping him from disappearing altogether. Because, in his mind, if she left, he'd vanish too. The last message he ever received from Lena came on a Monday morning. It was short, colder than usual. "Give me until tomorrow. Everything will be sorted. I promise, Wally." But Tuesday came, and nothing. No message, no apology, no voice note with laughter in the background. Just silence. Walter waited, watched the little green light beside her name disappear and never return. He refreshed the app, checked the wallet address, opened the crypto exchange over and over again. Like the numbers might change if he stared long enough, they didn't. The balance read 0. He opened their chat history, dozens of messages filled with affection, vulnerability, plans. Then one by one, the photos began disappearing. Her profile picture vanished. The name on her account turned into a string of meaningless numbers. And just like that, Lena was gone. No explanation. No goodbye. Walter sat on the edge of his bed, phone trembling in his hand. He whispered her name like a prayer, as if saying it might conjure her back. But only the hum of the refrigerator answered. Hours passed before he stood up. When he did, he went to the hallway drawer and pulled out the printed screenshots, the supposed flight confirmations, the blurry hospital IDs, the crypto wallet QR code she had sent just one last time. He stared at them. Each one now looked absurd. Paper lies. He tried calling the authorities. The woman on the other end of the line was polite, but clinical. Romance scams were common, she said. Very common. Crypto recovery, not likely. Did he ever meet her? No. Did he video chat with her? No. Did she provide identification? Nothing that could be verified. The line went quiet for a moment. Then the soft final blow. "I'm really sorry, sir, but there's not much we can do." Walter hung up and just sat in silence. Not just because of the money, which was now all gone. Not just because he might lose his house, which he would. But because the one person who made him feel alive again never existed. He didn't cry. Not at first. The tears came later, when he walked past Linda's photo on the mantel and whispered, "I'm sorry." Not even he knew who that apology was for. Maybe for Linda. Maybe for David. Maybe for himself for needing something so badly. He ignored every red flag waving right in front of him. And the worst part, even now, even after all of it, some part of him still hoped Lena would message him back. David Reed hadn't been home in 5 years, not since the night he and his father exploded into a storm of words they both regretted. Not since the funeral, when Walter's silence hurt more than anything he said out loud. Not since he boarded a plane and swore he wouldn't look back. But that voicemail changed everything. It was brief, broken, just a whisper through static. "David, I made a mistake. I need help." It didn't sound like the father he remembered. The strong, proud man who built fences by hand and never showed emotion. This voice was smaller, empty, almost scared. David listened to it 3 times before booking a flight home. When he pulled up to the house, it didn't look the same. The yard was overgrown, the porch light was flickering, and the curtains, Linda's old lace ones, hung limp behind dirty windows. Something inside him twisted. He knocked. No answer. The door creaked open when he pushed. The air inside smelled like stale coffee and dust. The silence was loud to loud. Then, from down the hallway, he heard the soft drag of footsteps. Walter appeared in the doorway, thinner than he remembered, paler, his shoulders no longer squared. His eyes, once steady and stern, looked like they hadn't rested in weeks. For a moment, neither of them spoke. David expected anger, bitterness, some gruff, guarded version of his father. Instead, Walter just said one word, his voice cracking. In the middle of it, "Son." That's all it took. David stepped forward and pulled him into an awkward, trembling hug, and Walter didn't resist. He held on like a man trying not to drown. They sat at the kitchen table, the one Linda used to serve Sunday breakfast on, and slowly, between deep sighs and long pauses, the story came out. The messages, the voice notes, the money, the promises. David listened in disbelief, his heart sinking with each detail. His father had always been careful, private, too proud, even. But this wasn't the man he knew. This was someone who had been starved for love and fed lies instead. Walter didn't ask for sympathy. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He only asked one thing: "Can you help me get my life back?" David didn't answer right away, but then he reached across the table, placed a hand over his father's, and said softly, "You don't have to go through this alone anymore." And in that moment, Walter finally allowed himself to cry, not from pain, but from the smallest flicker of something he thought he'd lost for good. Hope. Walter didn't get his money back. He didn't get his house back either. But somehow he began to get himself back. He moved in with David temporarily just until they could figure things out. The guest room was small, barely fit the boxes Walter brought with him. Most of what he owned had been sold or packed away. But there was something grounding about hearing David's footsteps in the hallway again. About smelling coffee brewing in the morning that he didn't make. They weren't exactly close, not yet. But they were trying. That meant something. One afternoon, David drove him to a support group. It was tucked inside a library meeting room, filled with plastic chairs and quiet people who avoided eye contact. Victims of scams. Some had lost thousands, others everything. Walter didn't plan on speaking. He just sat in the back, arms folded, watching the others tell their stories. And then, without meaning to, he started talking. He told them about Lena, about the messages, about the hope, about the love he thought was real. His voice shook, not because of shame but because saying it out loud made it real. He finished with one line that stayed with everyone in that room. "I wasn't stupid, I was lonely, and they knew exactly how to find that." Heads nodded. A woman near the front wiped a tear. For the first time in months, Walter didn't feel invisible. He felt seen, understood. The next few weeks were slow. Some days were better than others, but small. Things started to shift. He walked with Susan again. When she came by on Sundays, she brought peach pie. He brought a quiet apology. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. He started writing again. In an old notebook. Just thoughts, memories, fragments of conversations he wished he'd had. He didn't write about Lena right away. That wound was still raw. But he wrote about Linda, about David, about the park bench, the birds, the mornings he still managed to enjoy. There was no big comeback, no revenge, no courtroom victory, just small, human healing. One awkward laugh at a time, one text from David saying "You good, Dad?" instead of "What were you thinking?" And, in that quiet space between grief and forgiveness, Walter began to rebuild something far more valuable than money, a sense of worth, and a reminder that it's never too late to start over. Walter never imagined his story would end this way. Not with justice, not with a courtroom, not with the money restored. But with something quieter, something harder, something more honest. A lesson, one he carries now, not in shame but in truth. He shares his story not because it feels good, but because someone needs to hear it. Someone who just received a message that feels like hope. Someone who's lonely enough to believe every word. Someone who thinks love has come to save them when it's actually come to steal what little they have left. Walter stands now in small rooms with folding chairs and fluorescent lights. He speaks to strangers who know exactly how it feels to be fooled. He tells them what no one told him, that loneliness is a door. And if you're not careful, someone who doesn't love you will walk through it pretending they do. He doesn't cry when he tells his story anymore, but the people listening often do. Because it's not just about money. It's about trust, about the parts of ourselves we give away, hoping someone will hold them gently. And when that trust is shattered, it's not just a loss, it's a grief, a mourning for a future that will never exist. But Walter also tells them something else. Something that matters even more, that you can survive it, that love isn't just what someone gives you, it's also what you choose to give yourself, even after the damage. So if you're watching this and you've felt that shame, if you've questioned your own worth because of what someone took from you, know this: you are not stupid, you are not broken, and you are not alone. Share this story, because someone out there needs to hear it before it's too late.